Hi, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, my special guest today is Ryan Edwards. He's got a book out, very good book called Cryptids of the World, conclusive guidebook to the enigma animals seen across our natural world. So I'm sure we'll be talking about cryptids, Bigfoot, lots of different things from around the world. Can we please welcome Ryan to the show? Hello there.
Hey, Bob, it's a pleasure to be on the show tonight.
Thank you. What inspired you to write Cryptids of the World?
Well, that was my first book I wrote. It was back in 2020. And at that time, I've been into cryptozoology ever since I was a little kid. And there was all this, like, I guess, knowledge I had. And I was like, well, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So I'm like, let me write down what I know, what I think. And initially, it was kind of just a journal to myself of like, okay, I know about this creature. I've heard about this cryptid. What is the knowledge I know on this? And sooner or later, I was realizing, well, a lot of these cryptids, not a lot of people have heard about them, and not a lot of people write about them anymore. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can maybe put this as a book and get this published out and share some knowledge on these cryptids because there's a lot of them in there that people have probably have never heard about, like the Altitalu, a lot of lake monsters, the Big Man and Big McDewey, and I got it published, and it's kind of like my foot in the door when it comes to the world of cryptozoology because I've been into cryptids ever since I was a little kid, watching things like Monster Quest, finding Bigfoot, Nat Geo, things like that. But I've never really been active in the field. And with having a book, especially at a young age, I was 20 when I first published this book. It really helped me start going to conferences and talking to researchers and talking to eyewitnesses around the country.
Do you personally believe some cryptids could be undiscovered real animals?
Yes, like with my field of study when it comes to cryptozoology, it's cryptozoology. Crypto, of course, means hidden, but zoology is in there. I believe, in my mind, cryptozoology is the first step of zoology. A lot of these cryptids seen around the world are based on, I believe, biological species, on earthly biological species. For instance, the Sasquatch phenomenon here in the United States. That's kind of something I kind of have specialized in the past couple years. Is I believe this is a living, breeding species. It is procreating. It has evolved here on Earth. It's adapted to this world. Uh, some of these lake monsters seen around the world. Maybe these could be large sturgeon. They could be large eels. Some of these more what I like to call cryptids around the world, and one that kind of interests me, like these cryptids that don't make sense biologically. When you look at like the Dogman phenomena, you look at Mothman, you look at Owlman, all these cryptids that are more humanoid almost, that seem very like they couldn't evolve on Earth. These are cryptids I like to call paracryptids, more paranormal in origin. But I like to use the biological basis of cryptozoology and cryptids. I look a lot at the paleontological record. I look a lot at the zoological record, and using known science in this unknown field.
Why do you think Bigfoot remains one of the most famous cryptids in the world?
Well, for me, people ask me that question. First of all, it makes sense because in my mind, I believe Bigfoot is a primate. And talk to any primatologist around the world, uh, like for instance, Maria Mayer, they will say we only know 10% of known primates in the first place. We probably only know 1% of the species that have ever existed on this earth. And Big Sasquatch is a highly intelligent primate. And when you have intelligence and crypternal style behaviors, it's very easy to hide. And I think people kind of forget to realize how much wild space there is around the world still, and especially here in the United States. You can go and walk outside in parts of the United States and not touch a road for the rest of your life. And there's areas for these animals to hide. And something, especially when it comes to Bigfoot research, that I think people kind of forget is the intelligence of these animals. These are highly intelligent species. They can hide away from humans, and
Of course
I
they
think
can.
they're very aware of their environment. Like when people go out and do field research, I tell them these Sasquatch know you are there before you know you're there. Like you're in their backyard. Of course, they can hide away from you.
What do skeptics usually get wrong about Bigfoot research?
Well, I think one thing people get wrong with Sasquatch research and cryptozoology in general is that they kind of see the, to be honest, the TV show aspect of it. They see the entertainment aspect of it. They see people like myself as monster hunters, people with good old boys with shotguns in the woods hunting for monsters, like we're real life Scooby Doo or something. And that's not the truth of this research. I believe this is a known science. We should be using scientific principles in this research. And in my honest opinion, that's something that's kind of we've gotten away from in the past recent years. Like this has kind of became a entertainment based field in the past couple of years. I feel because in my mind, there's two different sides of when it comes to the paranormal and cryptozoology in general. You have the researcher, people that are in the field looking for these animals, or the people that are collecting eyewitness testimonies, people that are doing the DNA research. Then you have the entertainers, the storytellers, people that always have stories. They're always like, okay, I've seen this, or this eyewitness has talked to me on this eyewitness talked to me about this. And for me, the entertaining side is what really grabs people's attention in this. Think of how many people have gotten into the field thanks to shows like Finding Bigfoot or Unturned or like Ghost Adventures or stuff like this. But for me, I believe what should keep the attention afterwards the is the research because to me there is plenty of evidence showing that these animals exist, and there's evidence showing known scientific principles. And that's where skeptics get wrong is they think this is just kind of oh for show and oh you guys don't really have any evidence, but they're not willing to look at the evidence and the correlations between known sciences and cryptozoology.
A question from Ryan here. What's your favorite cryptid?
Hmm. With that one, I have two. I have, of course, Sasquatch because that's the one I do most of my research into. But really, the cryptid that got me into this field was a thunderbird. And thunderbirds are large avian cryptids seen here in the United States. They're described as large eagles or large vultures with wingspans up to 12 to 20 feet wide. And what really got me interested in these cryptids is because where I'm from is San Antonio, Texas. I'm from Central Texas, and back in the 70s, there were multiple sightings of these thunderbirds, literally less than 10 miles away from where I live. And I've actually have gotten reports of people that lived here back in the 70s saying, "Oh yeah, I saw one at Canyon Lake. I saw one here." And talking to people, I was like, "Okay, there's something to this." Because living here in Texas, like especially when it came to Bigfoot and stuff like that, I'm like, that's 1,000 miles away in the Pacific Northwest. But realizing that this cryptid sightings literally less than 10 miles away from where my house is really got me into this field. And I think that's why the Thunderbird kind of really holds a place in my heart because it kind of connects to like where I live. And also, it's a lot of Native American stories with the Thunderbird. That's where the name comes from. And I think one of my early memories, like literally, I think I was 6 years old when this happened. I was watching, if you remember the old show Monster Quest on
Oh,
History
yeah.
Channel, and it was a Thunderbird episode, and it's just a strong memory of mine seeing that Thunderbird cross the screen when they would do like witness replications, and I'm like, in my little 6-year-old brain, I'm like, monsters are real. There's stuff out there we don't know about, and it kind of enacted my love for nature, my love for cryptozoology up to this day.
You mentioned cryptids from Papua New Guinea. What are some of the strangest stories from that region?
Papua New Guinea. So it is a very interesting place. A lot of people like to call Papua New Guinea a lost world, like a real life Jurassic Park, because there's so much of it that it's unexplored. One of the most interesting cryptids people talk about from there is the ropin. The ropin is supposedly a living pterosaur, a pterosaur that is a flying reptile from the Mesozoic age. Of course, things like pterodactyls, pteranodons, and people supposedly have seen these creatures living on the rocks in Papua New Guinea. And they call them the ropin or devil flyers. These almost not birds. They use them as like flying reptiles with membranous rings and even bioluminescence. The locals say that these ropins have lights on their chests, and they use these lights to attract insects, and that they're able to swoop down and eat insects. And it's very interesting. But another one from Papua New Guinea that brings in a lot of my attention is what they call the devil pig or the hell pig. Locals and a couple of European explorers in the mountains of Papua New Guinea described a large, unknown mammal, something akin to almost like a giant pig, but it had three toes instead of two, and it was very large and would scare the locals. And later fossil discoveries have shown that there was a large marsupial indigenous to Papua New Guinea called the Diprotodon. Diprotodons were pretty much, they were giant wombats from Australia, but they're the size of modern day hippos, the size of modern day rhinos. And my thinking is, what if some of these creatures may survive into the modern day and have been seen in Papua New Guinea? Because I believe a lot of these cryptids are surviving species from prehistoric ages. It's something called Lazarus taxon, species that we believe were extinct but prevail into the modern age.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, Ray. Why do remote jungles, mountains seem to produce so many cryptic legends? Like in Australia, the Yowie and
No. And I think it's especially when it comes to cryptozoology and it comes to like these jungles and these mountains, it's kind of people get it, oh no, almost colorized. It's that idea of like think Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World, that there are areas in the world that are unexplored still. And these areas like jungles and high mountains and even extreme deserts, there are areas that people do not enter to, not even native tribes. There's parts of the Amazon that no human has ever walked in. And I think that's what breeds in this kind of idea of cryptids and unknown species roaming them. A big example I like to use is the Congo. Uh, the Congo region of Central Africa, there's multiple cryptids seen in that area. There's the Mokele Mbembe, or the one that stops the flow of rivers. There's the Mila Natoka, which is described as the one that kills elephants. And these animals are described as dinosaurs. And in my mind, at least, the likelihood of dinosaurs living to the modern age is pretty unlikely. It's 65 million years. I think they would have evolved at least a little bit differently from what they're seeing now. But people describe seeing sauropod dinosaurs and triceratops. But for me, I believe a lot of that is we call it cultural anachronism. Because back in the I think 1800s, 1900s, Africa was seen as the dark continent, a continent that was unexplored, a continent that was primordial in an age. And I think a lot of these cryptids that we see now are kind of a remnant of that idea of there is unexplored areas of Africa, but are they hiding dinosaurs? Most likely not. But are they hiding maybe unknown mammalian species? Are they hiding maybe bird species that haven't been discovered yet? Yes, most likely. There's the Mahamba. The Mahamba is described as a giant crocodile. Like European voters would describe them being on steamboats on the Congo, and they would see crocodiles the size of the steamboat, like 40, 50 feet long. And to me, that is something that's very likely in that region.
Have local tribal stories influenced modern cryptozoology?
Yes, for me at least, the first step of my any cryptid research or any cryptid investigation is looking at native tribes, looking at indigenous cultures, because with so many cryptids, so many monsters seen around the world, they've gotten so almost like I like to call it colonized almost. They have been bastardized thanks to a mixture of cultures. The greatest example I like to use is the Wendigo here in North America. When I talk to people about the Wendigo or even skinwalkers, people imagine for the Wendigo, for instance, they imagine a walking deer. They imagine a werewolf-like creature. They imagine a 9 foot, 10 foot tall humanoid with antlers of a deer and a skull for a head. And I talked to them like, okay, so that's what you think the Wendigo is, but the indigenous Algonquins, the original indigenous stories, talked about a skinny human-like creature. For them, the Wendigo was actually a spirit that would possess humans and make them become anthropologic, or they become cannibals. And that's what the original descriptions of these Wendigos were. But thanks to the colonization of European culture and the mixing of both that story and actual like werewolf folklore, Wendigo became more akin to almost like a werewolf, or akin to this transformating being that can transform into a deer almost like creature. So what I want to do is not look at the modern day. I want to look at the original indigenous folklore, because a lot of times indigenous cultures know what's in the area more than what later colonization does. Same thing with Sasquatch, same thing with skinwalkers, same thing with a lot of these cryptids, is I want to look at the indigenous folklore and then I reference the modern day sightings.
Well, when you talk about werewolf legends appear in so many cultures, what is it? I know back in the UK, the Flixton werewolf, for instance, started many, many hundreds of years ago. We seem to have got it in the UK, but it's in the US quite regular. People
Yeah.
have sightings.
Yeah. And for me, when it comes to like the werewolf phenomena, and here in the United States we call it the dogman phenomena, it's kind of interesting because for me, I believe a lot of it, especially here in the United States, it's cultural, I believe. Because I've come to realize that a lot of these regions where we have dogman sightings of places like Wisconsin, places like parts of Texas, parts of Oklahoma, parts of the Midwest, there's an interesting little thing I've noticed. A lot of places that have a lot of werewolf sightings or dogman sightings also have a large German population. And of course, the German culture has a lot of stories of werewolves in their folklore. And it goes back
Mm.
hundreds of years. And for me, are people referencing a actual monster, actual cryptid, or are they looking at it from a cultural lens? And I think it could be a little bit of both. Like the dogman phenomena, for instance, here in the United States, I believe there is something going on. I believe there is a creature happening, but I don't think it's something biological. Because if you look at what people are describing, they're describing a werewolf, they're describing a animal on two legs with what we call digitigrade legs, a human-like torso with shoulders. Biologically, that's very improbable to have evolved. But when you look at the ideas of werewolves throughout the ages, it's changed. Because if you look at medieval ages, the ideas of werewolves were not of some humanoid wolf. They describe people turning into wolves like literal wolves. But
Yeah,
when you look at Hollywood, look at how Hollywood's changed. In Hollywood in the early 50s, you had like the Wolf Man, and you had kind of people that just had a little bit of fur on them. But in the 90s and 80s, you have this combination of human and lupine traits. And it's funny how in the 80s and 90s, people started seeing animals like that in the woods. So I think a lot of these sightings are cultural based on maybe pop culture and real perspective. Because something I always tell people when it comes to paranormal research, your perspective is your reality. If you honestly believe in werewolves and believe in dogman, you're more likely to see that in your own reality. Is it saying that's not real? Not necessarily, because ideas of topas, ideas of conscious thoughts creating a physical being, things like that do exist. So I think a lot of these werewolf stories from around the world are based on the local cultures, because it's interesting how all these cultures around the world reference the same beings, but they have no connection. Because even werewolf stories happen in India. They have the were tiger. In Africa, they have the were hyena. But it's all these different ideas. It's the same idea, but all these different cultures.
Yeah, shape shifting and
Yeah,
all that. The Indians, they've dealt with them in the past as well.
yeah. And it's very interesting because I'm like, that's what makes me the thought of like, I don't think this is a biological species. This is something else. Could it be demonic? Could it be paranormal? Could it be interdimensional? Could it be extraterrestrial? That's not really where my research leads, but I think it could be something else going on here. And that's something I really bring up with cryptozoology a lot is that I believe this is a biological research and these are biological species, but there is something else going on as well. There's something paranormal going on, and I only use paranormal as a sense of it's not in the normal. It's not something biological. It's not something that's evolved here on Earth. But there is something, another phenomenon going on when it comes to cryptozoology.
What about the Loch Ness Monster? Why has the Loch Ness Monster endured pop culture for decades?
For me, when it comes to Nessie and the Loch Ness Monster, and just lake monsters in general, it's really, I kind of have a harder opinion on it because when it comes to the early sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, I think a lot of it was based on what I bring up as pop culture because it's interesting because I forget the road's name, but the road that actually is beside Loch Ness that opened up in the I believe the 20s and or the 30s that actually got people to Loch Ness. That's when a lot of these sightings started happening. Is when people went to Loch Ness, and one of the first sightings was of a motorist saying that he saw this plesiosaur-like animal coming out of the water and wading across the road towards towards the lake, and that's very, if we look at plesiosaurs nowadays, we can see that at least biologically they wouldn't be able to hold their necks at like a 90 degree angle like a crane or something like that. But if you look at the same year that happened, this was the same year that the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's book The Lost World got a movie adaptation, and in that movie it shows a plesiosaur doing the exact same action. I believe there is something in Loch Ness, but for me, I don't think it's a prehistoric species or a plesiosaur. I believe it's a some type of marine mammal, maybe something like a seal or maybe even a large eel that has used the River Ness to get into Loch Ness and survives there nowadays. Because there's been too many sightings of at least something in the lake. And that's something when it comes to me and lake monsters, is that I have a different opinion from a lot of people because I believe a lot of lake monsters are misidentifications, or they are a something maybe like a large sturgeon or a large eel. Because if you break it down at least biologically and break it down ecologically, think every animal, like there can't be just one Loch Ness monster. There has to be a population of them. There has to be at least between 50 to 500 to have a stable population. And are there 50 to 500 plesiosaurs living in a lake? I think we would have caught one by now, or one would have been seen. Like, could there be maybe a marine mammal, or maybe even a basking shark, or maybe even a Greenland shark that's moved into the Loch Ness and then has moved out at times? That is more likely because if you had 50 large animals living in this lake, in this loch, I believe, first of all, one probably they would be seen a lot more. And second, you would see it on the fishing. You would see there'd be almost no fish in the loch. There'd be no ecological balance in the lakes. So for me, I believe a lot of these lake monsters could be, if there's a river connecting them to the ocean, it could be it could be an ocean creature moving into the loch and then moving back out at times. At least that's what my honest opinion is. Or it could be it could be maybe underground caves that connects it to other lochs. Because I know near Loch Ness you have Loch Morag, and Loch Morag also has stories of a unknown creature living in that
Mm,
loch as well.
it does. A lot of locals up there, they they tell people, but there's a creature in the loch up there,
Yeah,
and but we don't want people around here.
yeah,
That's what they say anyway, because it's like a tourist attraction.
yeah. And that's something that too I bring up a lot of times when it comes to like cryptids and stuff like that. It's kind of that's called it crypto tourism. Because think if I have a feeling if the Loch Ness monster didn't exist, I don't think a lot of people would know what Loch Ness is in the first place. Look at here in the United States when there's Bigfoot sightings in a particular region, that usually a small town gets put on the map because of that. Because one town I love to go to is Fouke, Arkansas, and that's well known for the Legend of Boggy Creek. And the Legend of Boggy Creek is a Bigfoot film back in the 70s, and Fouke has kind of made its culture now. It's what brings people in. And think of Humboldt County and up in Northern California. That's where the first Bigfoot footprints were found, and where the Passing Inland film happened. And Bigfoot's become their mascot. It's become what they're known for. And that's one thing I look at with cryptozoology is when there's a cryptid sighting, it usually makes the area more famous or puts it on the map. It brings people in. It brings in tourism and money.
In some places in the Far East, there's giant spiders appear in these strange places.
Yeah. Like, for instance, I know of some Vietnam stories of Vietnam vets talking about seeing giant spiders the size of dogs in Vietnam, giant centipedes the size of like 4 to 5 feet long in these places of like Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos. And even in Africa, in the Congo Basin, there's the Jibba Fofi. The Jibba Fofi is described as a kind of a tarantula, but the size of a large monkey. Colonialists would be in the area, and when they would be driving, they thought they saw a monkey cross the road, but until they look and they realize it's a giant spider. And that's the type of stuff that I'm like, I'd rather deal with a Bigfoot or a werewolf than a giant spider. Because I don't know, I'm not an arachnophobe, but once I get to a certain size, I'm like, this isn't Harry Potter. I'm not going to deal with that.
Do you think there's prehistoric animals? Do you think they may survive in isolated places then?
I believe so. Like, especially when it comes to like more recent creatures. Because I'll give an example: the Nettie tiger and parts of Chad in Africa. Locals describe the Nettie tiger, or also called the Hagel. They describe it as a large cat, but it has a short tail, very strong front arms, and kind of a sloped back. And one big thing that separates this animal from other like lions and leopards and things like that has giant canines, two giant fangs that come out the front of the mouth. And when like researchers would bring in what would have like different photos of animals, like, okay, did you see a lion? Did you see a leopard? Did you see a cheetah? Know what animal they would always point at? They would always point at a smilodon, or what we know as the saber-toothed cat or saber-toothed tigers to some people. And this animal supposedly went extinct 10,000 years ago. But why are people describing the exact same morphology into the modern day with this head gel? And even in parts of like America, there's been stories of people seeing giant lions in parts of Montana and parts of Idaho. And when they look at these giant paw prints, they're like that size.
Hmm.
And people don't know. Not a lot of people know that there was a giant lion in America about 10,000 years ago. Got Panthera atrox, and these lions are literally probably almost 2 times the size of the modern African lion. And if people are describing a prehistoric species when they don't know it should exist, that's what interests me. Especially like when indigenous cultures do the same thing. They're describing an animal that they shouldn't know about, but yet they still see it. So I think a lot of these cryptids around the world, especially the mammalian ones, are species from like the Pleistocene or the Pliocene. They are surviving Lazarus taxon and animals from an earlier age.
Why do you think cryptids continue to capture human imagination in the modern scientific age?
For me, I think it's because people love to explore. People love a mystery. There's a reason why Indiana Jones movies are always popular. Like people love the ideas of exploring and that kind of the idea of there's stuff out there that we don't know about, and humans love that. Look at all the adventure movies that come out, all the adventure novels that exist. People love mysteries. People love ideas of that kind of the romanticization of a guy out there with a machete chopping at a jungle looking for an ancient temple or looking for a monster that shouldn't be out there. And for me, with cryptozoology and paranormal research, how do we how do we merge that? How do we merge the romanticization of like explorers in the jungles looking for unknown species or unknown animals and the scientific age? And that's what I think cryptozoology brings in is okay, the romanticization of exploring does still exist out there, and there are mysteries out there because the second us as a species say we know everything, we truly don't. Like the science and and questions should always breed more questions, not just answers. And that's something I think people ought to get wrong nowadays is that they think everything's been explored. They think we know what's in the woods. They think we know what's on every mountaintop, but we don't. There are still regions to be explored still, and that's what cryptozoology and paranormal research brings in. Is that let's go over that next hill. Let's go into that deep ocean. Let's go into that lake and see what's down there. Because without questions, we can never get to the answers. And how we did get to those answers a lot is through science and through research, and that's what cryptozoology does.
Yeah, but when you look at it, I think there's 75% of the earth is water.
Yeah.
So there could be creatures still out there what we just don't know about.
Yeah, like when recently I've been talking to people thinking about like deep sea animals. Like if you would go to the bottom of the ocean, it's an alien world to us. Like the pressure, the extremophiles, the environment is so alien to us that the animals are so alien. Think you have anglerfish, you have bioluminescent squid, you have animals that literally glow in the dark. And if you told a person 100 years ago that there are squid the size of a school bus that glow in the dark, they'd call you crazy. They would say you're a madman. But now, thanks to science, we know these animals exist. And for me, I'm like, that's the interesting part when it comes to like cryptozoology and paranormal is that looking for the unknown and looking for these alien worlds out there. And a lot of times, yes, it could be in a deep ocean, but it could be in a deep jungle somewhere. It could be up in a high mountain valley somewhere that we find these cryptids and we find animals that shouldn't exist but do exist.
What about, I know in the UK there's been sightings of black panthers.
Yeah.
What about in the USA? Has there been more sightings of black panthers or other strange animals?
Yes. There's been phantom cat sightings across the United States. A lot of good friends of mine out in East Texas have had sightings of what they call black mountain lions. Because here in the United States, there's only a couple species of cats that are indigenous. We have the mountain lion or Felis concula. We also have the jaguarundi. The jaguarundi is described as a black cat, but it's really small. It's about the size of like a house cat. But
Right.
people are describing large black cats that should not exist here in the United States. And for me, I think it's kind of a very similar phenomenon to what's happening in the UK. I think these are escapees or animals that have been released into the wild and that still exist and have survived thanks to like hunting deer and things like that. Because, for instance, I'll give an example. A place I used to research a lot is a place called Brown Springs. It's up in Oklahoma. And a couple years ago, a Tiger King, a guy that had a large area of wildcats, released them and released a bunch of these wildcats into the woods. And I think 42 were released, and only like 28 of them were discovered. So, where did the rest of these other cats go? I think they were able to breed and actually survive into the area because people, into this day, see black cats in that area.
Right. There's a question here from Shelley. Question: Ever heard of boundary walkers?
I have actually not heard that term before. I have not heard of boundary walkers before.
No, I can't say I have as well, or else I'd answer that question myself.
Yeah,
But I'm sure Shelley will get back to us.
yeah.
And do you think the internet has changed cryptic research and sightings? Then
100%, yes. Like in the in modern internet age, I've realized there's more cryptids being seen now than I think there ever have been. And could this be because of human exploration and people going to deeper areas of the woods? Yes, but I think a lot of it is the internet age. A great example I use is the rake. The rake or the fleshgate or whatever you want to call it was a internet meme. It was a 4chan uh, creature that was created for a horror internet show back in like the 2006 or something. And back in this creature is described as like a skinny humanoid, all white, no fur, and it's a internet creature. It was created for a horror competition, but within the past couple years, people have been seeing this creature in the woods. I've gotten people talk to me like, "Oh, I've seen the rake in the real life," and I'm like, "But how are you seeing something that we have literally seen was made up from someone's imagination?" I think the internet has a big forte when it comes to what people think is real and what people think is not real. Slender Man, the Rake, even the Dogman to an extent. A lot of these creatures that are we know were created from the internet. People see into reality, and it brings up what I brought up earlier is that when you believe something exists from like maybe the internet or a TV show or something like that, you're more willing to see it in your reality into the woods. If I always bring it up with Bigfoot researchers, if you have Bigfoot on the brain, you're more likely to see Bigfoot in the woods. If you think the Slender Man is real or the Rake is real, you're more likely to see it in the woods. And I think the internet has kind of almost muddied the waters, you can say, of the cryptozoology. It's made it that we've gotten away from the research and towards the more kind of spectacle aspect of it, the romanticization of monster hunting and there's creatures in the woods that we don't know about, and away from the true science of this field. And that's something I talk to a lot of my other research friends about is how can we get away from the spectacle and keep the science? And I think the internet honestly really doesn't help that. It helps out with connecting eyewitnesses, connecting research, but I always tell people this is like if you have 1,000 sightings of all these cryptids, yes, you have 1,000 sightings, that's great, but go deeper than that. Look for the correlations. Like, for instance, are there maybe more Bigfoot sightings in this region at this certain time of year? Are there certain fur colors you're seeing? Are there certain maybe Bigfoot prints you're finding? And that's what the research is about: is looking for these correlations and looking for these the scientific notations within this field. And the internet can help with that, but I think it's kind of hard for people to separate the science away from the spectacle of it.
Yeah, a lot of them could be interdimensional creatures.
Yeah.
She was just talking. She said once we were talking about the boundary walkers, I'm talking about the twins, King Tut's brother Vikings. An Indian spirit wears long coat of black feathers.
Hmm. When it comes to the Indian spirit, I have heard of I know one kind of a long black feathers is like the raven mocker from Cherokee folklore. That's supposedly like a spirit that actually comes to you when you're dying, and that's why the Cherokee would actually have people with someone and a healer when they would be dying, because stories go the raven mocker would actually come and steal their heart when they're dying, and that's the reason why they would die is due to the raven mocker. But boundary walker, I have not heard that term before, but interesting.
Yeah, Shelley was just saying he carries three objects.
Hmm.
No, I can't say I've heard of it as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Um, if you could prove one cryptid real tomorrow, which would you choose?
Hmm. I think due to how much people know about it, I think Bigfoot or Sasquatch, because I think that is the cryptid that's most likely to exist, and just the implications of it. Because this is something I've had talks with other researchers. Is if we found Sasquatch, what would the next step be? Like, would we put preserves out there in the wild for Sasquatch? And that brings in another question that a lot of people wonder about is Bigfoot. Is this a human species or is this a non-human species? Like, is this some type of human living out in the woods, or is this a some type of giant ape? And I go towards giant ape, but what if we did DNA testing and showed it was a human? And that brings in a whole other sway of other questions. Like, for instance, if Bigfoot was proven and it's a human, do they have human rights? Can Bigfoots vote now? Can Bigfoots be saved? Where we have Catholic missionaries going out there trying to convert the Sasquatch to Catholicism? Like, there'd be so many questions, and it would change society, I think, if we discovered a human-like species literally living in our backyards. Because these Bigfoot sightings have been really close to where we live, and it's really interesting because when it comes to these animals, I think discovering them it would bring in a lot more questions on what it means to be human and what else is out there. What else should we be questioning about?
Do you think they're all connected then?
To an extent, not exactly. Like when it comes to cryptozoology, ufology, and then the paranormal, I think one thing we need to kind of stay, at least I try to stay away from this, just because it's unknown, we shouldn't all put it in the same box. Like I believe there is connections within these fields, but I don't think all of it is truly connected. Like for instance, I have a lot of people that talk to me and they're like, "Well, I think Bigfoot is or Sasquatch is a spirit," and I'm like, "Okay, that could be, yes, it could be, but at least my research goes away toward that it is a living, breathing species." But one thing I always bring up when it comes to cryptozoology and the paranormal is Schrodinger's cat, quantum physics. If it is not measured and been identified, it's all things at once. So when it comes to the Sasquatch phenomena, I'm like, I personally think that it's a living, breathing species, but I can always be wrong. It is all things at once. It could be a spirit. It could be interdimensional. It could be a living, breathing species. It could be extraterrestrial. It could be a government, some type of government creation, because we haven't discovered it yet. Because we haven't discovered it, it is all things at once. It is all connect. It is all connected until we break it down individually. And I think for some people, when you try to connect all of it, you kind of not really muddies the water, but you do see some of these connections, and it kind of gets away towards the more niche aspect of this field, which is like let's break down the little parts and then try to see the connections after that.
Have you ever experienced anything unexplained yourself, Ryan?
For me, it I really haven't had any sightings, but I have had a couple auditory reactions. I did a couple years ago. I was on an investigation, and I was up in Oklahoma. I was in a place called Brown Springs with a couple buddies of mine. There's been Bigfoot sightings. There's a haunted cemetery out in the middle of the woods. There's been dogman sightings, and me and a couple other guys we were on one of these tracks on one of these roads out there at night, and we were flaring the fields, trying to see if we can see any unknown heat signatures or anything like that. And we were seeing all these deer and stuff like that. But then we get into a kind of a swampy area, and we have all our windows down. We're going like maybe 10, 15 miles per hour. And we turn this corner, and it's so interesting because it's outside at night. It's you have all the sounds of nature, and it was like someone dropped a pin. It was like someone flipped a switch. It was going like that, and it was that zone of silence that I've heard about, and I experienced myself of going to an area and actually having silence, and then on our right in the wood line, I started hearing something move, and I tried to clear it, try to see if I could use thermal, but we couldn't see what was there. And later that night, we also heard a Bigfoot howl that same night. So I think maybe a Sasquatch was in the area, but we just didn't see it.
Right, yeah. There's a question from Stephen. Ryan, do you think what do you think is going on in the national parks with all these disappearances?
Hmm. Well, especially when it comes to disappearances, especially in the United States, I think it could be a litany of different reasons. One thing, like if you know Dave Paulides and the missing 411 phenomena in his writings, I've actually been able to talk to Dave Paulides a couple times. He's a great guy to talk to. I think a lot of it could be unknown phenomena. I think there could be people going missing thanks to
Mm, because
cryptids. Like
yes,
I
yes.
tell people all the time when it comes, like especially with Bigfoot. I don't think Sasquatch and Bigfoot is a monster. I don't think it's a monster in the woods, but it's like any animal. Like heck, if you anger your dog and you put your dog in a corner, your dog's gonna bite you. With these animals, if they're 8 to 9 feet tall and you anger a Sasquatch, you're not going to be found. I don't think so. And also, one thing I've been doing a lot more research into recently, especially here in the United States, is the idea of feral people. Like parts of the Appalachian Mountains and parts of the Ozarks, people talk about seeing people in the woods, but not regular people, but like these feral people
Mm,
wearing skins, people.
voices and
Yeah, and it's interesting because for me, that's something that's very likely. Like people, we're intelligent, we're smart enough to hide away from other people, and especially if you got into closer genetics, there could be certain mental faculties that would be lost. Like there's the Whitakers of West Virginia. This family now is so inbred and so much genetic in diversity that they can't even use English. They make dog barks to each other. They make sounds, and you're able to kind of understand it, but they almost have their own language. You have the blue people in the Appalachians. This family, oh, if I can remember their names off the top of my head, I can't. But they were there was a small valley, and they stayed in the family. You can say they were so inbred their skin literally turned blue because they had a genetic deformity within their blood that turned their blood blue and their skin blue. But thanks to in a couple years, thanks to breeding with other people, it was able to go away. But I think that some of these national parks disappearances could be thanks to maybe feral people living in the parks. And it has been shown too that there have been plenty of stories of serial killers living in national parks and camping out in the middle of the woods. And if a person goes missing, and no one would ever even know about it. And does it necessarily mean that a lot of these national parks disappearances are like aliens or spirits or portals? I think some of them could be, but it's trying to ask. You don't want to answer a question with another question. That's like when people tell me, like,
There's
"Well,
lot.
go to
I'm going to say, Ryan, there's lots of places around the world what you call hotspots where
yeah,
people they can just say, right, I'm just going out, love. I'll be back for tea. I won't be long. Never returned.
yeah,
Vanished. The dog might return, but the person itself has just vanished,
yeah."
completely gone.
No, and there's a lot of these stories of like people walking on trails, and the person literally 10 feet ahead of you, and they turn a corner and they're gone. And those are the stories that are so interesting because nothing could take you in that quickly. No one could just like nothing came off the trail, grabbed you, and went off the trail in that amount of like it within a minute. So where did this person go? Could it be interdimensional? Maybe the people walk
Hmm.
into a portal. Maybe
I
it
think
is.
they've either walked into a portal by mistake and couldn't get back out, just
Yeah,
vanished.
because mathematically it has been shown that there are other realities. There are other universes stacked on top of our universe. Could these places be maybe areas where people talk about the veil is a little bit thinner and people could cross into it? It is a possibility. And it brings in another question of like some of these cryptids and these other things getting seen around the world. Could these phenomena be where something from another area comes into our reality and maybe doesn't go back? If people can disappear, why couldn't something from somewhere else disappear from there and come here? And that's the stuff that's so interesting when it comes to like looking at the unknown because there are so many unknowns that we know that uh there is so much that we know about at least mathematically, scientifically, of other universes, other realities that we don't know what's going on around here. And people could be disappearing thanks to like portals or like areas where the veil is a little bit thinner. Because for me, it is interesting how it all happens in similar areas, like national parks areas and parts of like the Nahanni Valley up in Canada. You have the land between the lakes here in the United States. You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
yeah, you have Yosemite. You have a lot of places in the UK where a lot of phenomena occur all in the same area. And I don't think that's just by coincidence. Just by coincidence, I think that is by for a reason for something is occurring there.
Oh, definitely. I would just wonder about your book. Are there any cryptids you wish you had included in the book?
Second,
We talk about cryptids and
yeah,
different animals from around the world. What wasn't included in your book? And you thought, I should have put that in the book.
there has been a couple. The one I do kind of wish I did put in there is the one. The kulakala. The kulakala is a unknown bird seen in Africa. Natives talk about the kulakala being a large, almost like a stork, but the stork can't fly, and it only walks. And it's the natives describe it as being about 6 foot tall, and actually it kills people. The natives say it is a large flightless bird that stands up on two legs and has a large head, and it chases down people. And the stories of this Kulakana actually goes back into like the 1800s, but there really haven't been any sightings since like the 1960s, 1970s. One researcher that did a lot of research into it was Ivan T. Sanderson and Carl Schuker. And when you look at this giant predatory bird, when we look at prehistory, those animals did exist in South America. There's something called a forest rocket, or you might have heard of the terror bird. These were giant flightless birds that were predatory. They would stand 6 to 8 feet tall, and they would eat horses. They would eat small mammals, but these African tribesmen are describing the same bird, the same species in the modern day. So I think it could be an idea of a prehistoric animal surviving to the modern day. And that's only a cryptid I've heard about maybe in the past couple of years. And I wish I added that to the book, but I hadn't heard about it, so I just didn't add it yet.
What's next for you after this book? Are you researching any more? To looking into something different?
Actually, yeah, because that was my first book. I've actually have released two books since then. My second book was Sasquatch: A Prehistory of a Living Legend. It was about the evolutionary origins of Sasquatch. Like, where could Sasquatch have come from? And I think, personally, Bigfoot is a prehistoric species that has survived into the modern age. And my third book was titled Beyond Sasquatch. It's about the other unknown primates seen here in North America. A lot of people don't realize that Bigfoot's not the only cryptid primate seen here in North America. Like, you might have, I don't know if you've ever heard of the devil monkey before. Like,
Mm.
these devil monkeys are described as giant baboons. Uh, there's people up in Oklahoma and Texas that describe seeing these troops of like 3 or 4 baboons, but these baboons are like the size of people. And they're very vicious. They're nocturnal. They can walk on 2 legs at times. And people call them these devil monkeys. There's also the sightings of what we call the gugwe. The gugwe is described as like a Bigfoot like creature, but its head's different. You probably have seen like a picture of like a mandrill or a picture of like a baboon. Imagine like a baboon muzzle, but on a Sasquatch, and it has supposedly 3 toes on its foot. And this is something I wrote about in my most recent book, Sasquatch Beyond Sasquatch, the other unknown primates in North America.
Where can listeners follow your work and buy your book?
Of course. Well, I am available on social media. Of course, that's how you do promoting nowadays, I guess. I'm available on Facebook, Instagram, things like that. If you're like a Brian Edwards cryptozoologist, I'm pretty sure I'll pop up somewhere, hopefully, if Google will let me. And if you want to buy my books, but they're available on Amazon. They're also available on Barnes and Noble. Uh, if you check out Brian Edwards' books, Cryptozoology, they'll pop up. My first book is, of course, Cryptids of the World, a guide to the enigmatic creatures seen around our natural world. My second book is Sasquatch: A Prehistory of a Living Legend. And that one was actually, I had the pleasure of having my foreword actually written by the great cryptozoologist Ken Gerhard by that. And then
Okay, yeah.
third book was Beyond Sasquatch, the other unrecognized primates in North America. And that one, thanks to my research into that, I actually have my foreword in that written by Lauren Coleman, which is Lauren Coleman and King Gerhard are literally 2 heroes of mine. And
Yeah.
that's not the funny thing being in this research field is that like working with people that I used to watch on TV and I really look up to in the field and actually be able to work with them one on one nowadays. It's a crazy life I live sometimes.
Oh, they're great people, both of them. I've had
Yeah.
them both on my show over the years.
Wow.
Great people, great guests to have, great knowledgeable people.
Yes.
What they don't know about is anybody's business.
Yes. And that's something too, like I've talked to like Ken and Lauren, Bob Blackburn, Adam Davies in the past. And with
Yeah,
me only being 25, they're always like, well, you're the next generation of cryptozoologists. And I'm like, I kind of see myself as that, but I'm like, I'm trying to bring in more people into this field, especially young people, because sooner or later, this next generation, they retire, they get out of the field, they things like that, they die off. So I want to bring in the younger generation into this and make the people my age or in their 20s or teenagers open their eyes to cryptozoology because I feel like there's not a lot of young people in this field anymore. And that's something one of my biggest missions in this is bringing in the young people and showing them like, no, there is stuff to this. There is not just being on TV and writing books, but there is research and bringing in these people and making sure that cryptozoology and the paranormal has a next generation and a generation after that.
I've always said that as well. We need more people out there
Yeah.
to
But
learn a little bit more now because people are getting older. You can't just last forever and ever and ever.
yes, like there's always a joke when I go to when I go to conferences. Like I always go to the Texas Bigfoot conference. I always go to Falk, and I always have my table set up, and I'm like I'm literally the youngest person in this room right now. Like, and I've realized when it comes like especially the Bigfoot field, it's mostly the older generations, usually older people. There's not a lot of people within my age bracket, and I'm like, okay, how can I change this? How can I alter this? Because that older generation, like a good friend of mine, talks about like MUFON and UFO research. When you look at UFO research, usually the youngest person in that room is usually in their 40s. And I'm like, okay, how can we bring in the next generation? Because if you don't, the research dies, the field dies. And if there's no one to take that step and take that place, there's no research happening. And that's one thing I try to do is like it does kind of help me being like my 9 to 5 job. I'm a school teacher, and I kind of bring that into this field of like how can I teach people about cryptozoology and make it entertaining enough to keep their attention and make them want to stay in this field.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Of course.
I know we've done it on a Sunday for a change. It's usually a Wednesday or a Friday. I know you couldn't make it during the week, but I made time for you to come on a Sunday night.
Yeah, I have a full schedule, so I really do appreciate you working with me on this and having me out on the show, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Thank you to everybody in the chat room, as always. It's nice for people to ask questions from the chat room as well. So
Yeah,
thank you again to everybody. And thank you to my guest, Ryan Edwards.
of course.
You
And
take care and enjoy your rest of your day.
thank you, Bob. Of
And I'll catch up with you very soon.
course.
Bye for now.
Bye.